20. Primitive camp defense tricks that make expensive wilderness security gear look useless. You bought the motion sensors. You have the satellite communicator clipped to your belt. Your tent came with a color-coded rainfly and a warranty. Yet every year, people still get caught off guard in the backcountry by situations that technology promised to prevent. The real secret, and I'll show you exactly what it is before we're done, is that wilderness defense stops being about gear the moment you understand how your ancestors actually stayed alive. This isn't about going backward, it's about learning why they never needed to go forward. If you've been watching survival content, you've seen the expensive kits and the brand name systems. You've heard that the best defense is digital. Drop a pin on your location. Let the rangers know where you are. Keep your phone charged. But here's what happens in actual wilderness conditions. Batteries die in the cold. Signals don't reach into valleys. Snow and distance laugh at your subscription. Meanwhile, indigenous peoples thrived in those same valleys for thousands of years with none of it. They used their landscape. They read it. They built into it. And when danger came, they didn't unlock a phone. They moved. Before we go deeper into this, I want to quickly mention something. The complete guide on camp defense mechanics and how to layer these ancient systems together is available in the description below and in the pinned comment at the top. It breaks down the patterns and triggers behind every single defense we'll cover today. Worth checking out if you want to understand the full architecture of wilderness safety. One more thing before we start the countdown. Comment below and tell me something. What's the last time a piece of outdoor gear actually saved you? Not protected you, saved you. I'm genuinely curious what works in the real field, not just in the testing footage. Subscribe so you catch the answer when I pin the best responses. Number 20 is campsites nobody sees. Military doctrine teaches this as site hardening. Archaeology calls it stealth settlement. Your grandparents just called it common sense. A visible campsite is a compromised campsite. When you pitch your tent on a ridge or in an open meadow because the ground is flat and convenient, you're announcing yourself to everyone and everything within 2 miles. Weather passes over you first. Predators see you first. Hunters traveling through see you first. A visible camp is a camp that gets problems. The people who survived longest in wild country never camped in obvious places. They nested. They found a small hollow, a stand of thick spruce, the lee side of a rock outcrop. Somewhere that a casual observer walking past wouldn't see the structure of a fire or the shape of a shelter. This doesn't mean hiding so well that rescuers can't find you. That's a different calculation for emergencies. It means positioning yourself so that normal passage doesn't reveal your presence. A camp set back 50 feet into tree cover instead of 20 feet into a meadow changes everything about who notices you. The time investment is zero. The cost is zero. The only requirement is that you look at the landscape before you sleep. High-end GPS watches can tell you your exact elevation and send your coordinates to the cloud. They cannot tell you which hollow will be invisible to a person walking the ridge at sunset. Your eyes can. Your knowledge of how a person's attention actually works can. Number 19 involves something you're probably already carrying. Rock and stone arrangement. Before the historical record, before settlement, before anything resembling modern mapping, humans used stone cairns as messages. A pile of rocks in a certain arrangement meant, water this direction. Another meant danger. A third meant traveled this way. Archaeologists find them on ridgelines and passes, some of them older than writing itself. They worked because stone doesn't require power. Stone doesn't require literacy. Stone cannot be missed if you know the language. A defensive application is simple. Arrange rocks at the perimeter of your camp in a pattern only you recognize. Smooth, flat stones pointing outward in 3 directions means danger approached from the north and you moved south. A specific pile near your water cache means someone's been there. A broken arrangement means the camp was disturbed while you were away. No technology detects this except human observation. But if you're there when the disturbance happens, you'll see it. You'll know if something moved your carefully placed stones. This works in rain. This works in snow. This works when the temperature drops so far that batteries stop responding and your watch screen freezes. Rock doesn't care. It just sits there telling you what happened while you slept or while you were hunting. Number 18 is even simpler. Wait, this part is important. The way you think about defense in wilderness is probably wrong. You're imagining a tent and a perimeter. You're imagining a fire and a clear sight line. But ancient camp security was about something different entirely. It was about knowing you were being observed before the observation became dangerous. Pay attention to this next section, because the mechanisms behind these early warning techniques are explained in full in the guide available right now in the description. The guide goes much deeper into the sensory systems your ancestors built into every camp, and frankly, this is the knowledge that changes how you move through wild country from that point forward. Get it from the pinned comment or the description if you want to understand the architecture of what we're building here. Tripwire systems, not the kind that triggers an explosion, the kind that triggers your awareness. The principle is ancient, and the application is wilderness-specific. A thin, nearly invisible cord or vine strung at about knee height between two trees at the perimeter of your camp, taut enough that something moving through it will create tension, creates what trappers called a consciousness system. It doesn't harm, it doesn't stop. It tells. If something moves through it during the night, you'll feel a tug on the other end. If you've anchored the other end to your shelter or your gear, you'll know before anything comes into the light of your fire. Raccoons trigger it. Deer trigger it. A person moving carefully will trigger it, unless they're experienced enough to feel for the line, at which point they're so focused on your cord that they're not thinking about anything else. The materials cost nothing. A length of paracord or a piece of natural vine costs exactly what you can find. The setup takes 5 minutes. The sensitivity never depends on electricity or signal strength. Number 15 is the pressure plate trigger. I mean the actual ground beneath your camp entrance. Before metal springs were manufactured, hunters and frontier settlers understood something simple. Soft soil compresses, and compressed soil holds a shape. Dig a shallow depression, maybe 2 inches deep, directly in front of the main approach to your shelter. Fill it with the loosest material you can find. Dust, ash, fine sand, anything that doesn't hold weight well. Now spread a thin sheet of birch bark or cloth across the top, just barely visible. Not meant to fool anyone, meant to leave a record. Anything that steps on that depression sinks slightly. That footprint stays there until rain or wind removes it. You wake in the morning and you know exactly what passed through your camp in darkness. You know how many. You know the approximate weight. You know the stride pattern. A bear paces differently than a human. A deer bounds. A person walks. The ground itself becomes your security log, and it costs nothing to maintain. Number 14 is something most modern campers have never even heard of, which is exactly why it works. It's called a deadfall alarm, and it's been used by trappers and scouts for 300 years. You take a long stick, maybe 3 to 4 feet, and you lean it against a tree at a steep angle, like a crude ladder. You balance another stick horizontally across the angled one, but only barely balanced. Just enough tension that anything brushing against that horizontal stick causes it to fall. When it falls, it makes a distinctive crack and clatter against whatever's below it. The noise isn't loud enough to wake someone across a valley, but it's loud enough that you know something's at that exact spot. Position these around your camp perimeter. One at the north entry, one at the water source, one near your gear cache. An animal moving through darkness has no way to avoid triggering it without understanding exactly what the trap is. A person who knows what to look for can spot it, but that requires them to move slowly enough that you've already heard them approaching through other means. Before we continue, keep this in mind for a second. Everything on this list shares one principle. They create a delay between detection and arrival. That delay is your survival margin. That's the difference between waking up prepared and waking up surprised. If you want to understand the deeper mechanics of how camp security actually works, how your ancestors layered these systems, and the exact spacing patterns that maximize their effectiveness, that information is in the complete Wilderness Defense Guide available in the description. It's a paid resource, and it covers the signal patterns, the trigger sequences, and the full layering strategy that makes a camp actually defensible. Most people never learn this stuff because it's not in any online survival course, but it's available to you right now if you want to go deeper than this video can show you. Number 13 brings us to something that still confuses people who've only ever thought about security in urban terms. It's the buffer perimeter. Your actual camp, your shelter, your fire, your gear, sits in the center. But you establish a secondary zone around it, maybe 20 to 30 feet out. In that buffer zone, you place objects deliberately, smooth stones arranged in specific patterns, sticks laid across paths in particular ways, bundles of dry leaves, anything that would create noise or show disturbance if something moved through it. This outer ring isn't meant to stop anything. It's meant to be disturbed before the inner camp is reached. You're essentially creating concentric circles of notification. The outer ring alerts you first. If something gets through that, The next ring gives you a second signal. If it somehow gets through that, the third line of actual defense has the advantage of having heard the thing coming from at least 40 feet away. Humans who understand the system can navigate it slowly and carefully. Animals cannot. A black bear moving through a buffer perimeter will trigger multiple disturbances. It's not trying to be quiet, but a person moving with intent can choose their steps more carefully, and that's the point. This system separates the accidental from the deliberate. Number 12 requires understanding predator behavior, which is the foundation of everything else on this list. Predators, and I mean both the four-legged and two-legged kind, follow the same basic rule. They avoid what they don't understand. A wolf won't cross a line of fire without reason. A thief won't enter a space where the layout itself tells him the occupant knows something he doesn't. Number 12 is the false perimeter. You create a deliberately confusing entry point. Stake out a low fence or arrange branches in a way that forces anyone approaching to slow down, to think about their next step, to choose between going left or right around an obstacle. That hesitation is your win. You don't need to stop them. You need them to make a decision that costs them time, and time is what every intruder fears most. The military used this in both world wars. Barbed wire wasn't just about cutting skin. It forced soldiers to choose between going through it, which took time and made noise, or going around it, which exposed them to fire from prepared positions. The principle was pure psychology. Make the path uncertain, and people will assume someone prepared for them on the other side. They're right to assume that. A false perimeter costs nothing if you already have fallen branches or scrap wood. You're not trying to stop anyone physically. You're trying to change how they think. A seasoned camper might recognize it for what it is, but that recognition itself changes their behavior. They slow down, they pay attention, and that's exactly what you wanted. Number 11 is something your ancestors understood so well they stopped thinking about it. It's the cleared line of sight. Before building a cabin, before pitching a permanent camp, before planting a garden, settlers cleared the brush and small trees within 30 to 50 feet of their dwelling, not for beauty, for visibility. If someone approaches through the bush, you see them when they're still 50 feet away. That distance is survival. It's the difference between being ready and being surprised. Modern campgrounds don't have this anymore. We build under the trees because they're prettier. We like shade. We like feeling hidden. But hidden works both ways. Anything moving toward you through that brush stays invisible until it's close. And anything you need to defend against knows that just as well as you do. Clearing sightlines takes a few hours with basic tools. A machete, a handsaw, maybe an axe. You're not clear-cutting. You're removing the thick brush and saplings that block a direct line from your camp to the outer perimeter you've already established. Open ground between you and the buffer zone means you see the moment of entry. You see it in daylight. You see it at night, if there's any moon or starlight. You see it before the person moving through that space has committed to crossing it. This is the part that still bothers me, frankly. Our instinct is to hide, to nest in cover. But cover that hides you also hides what's coming. The math is ugly when you work it out. Every bush you leave standing is a place something can hide while deciding whether to move closer or retreat. Remove it, and that decision gets made in the open, where you can see it. Before we continue, I need you to focus on something important here. The mechanisms behind why these primitive techniques work so well, the psychology of barriers, the science of early warning systems, the tactical advantages of visible space versus hidden approach. That's all explained in complete detail in our guide, the Wilderness Camp Defense ebook. It's in the description and the pinned comment at the top. It's not free, but it's built specifically for people who are tired of spending money on gear that doesn't actually solve the real problems. The guide shows you the logic behind each method, how to adapt them to your specific environment, and how to combine them into a system instead of just random tricks. Number 10 is about sound discipline, which is the flip side of creating noise that warns you. In your camp, you control the noise. Outside the camp, noise works against you. The moment you start moving through your own perimeter at night, walking to collect water, checking the outer edge, responding to a sound, you become the thing that intruders fear. Noise means you're alert. Noise means you know the terrain and you own it. But there's a trick to this. You can't actually be silent. Humans aren't built for total silence in the wilderness. Twigs snap, clothes rustle, boots shift stones. Instead of fighting that, seasoned wilderness dwellers move with predictable rhythm. They walk at a steady pace instead of creeping. They don't try to avoid sounds entirely. They create noise that matches what an animal or the wind would make. This sounds insane until you understand it works because it doesn't trigger the alert response that careful, sneaking movement does. A person moving cautiously through darkness, trying desperately not to make a sound, creates tension in every motion. That tension leaks into movement. It becomes unnatural. An observer, or an intruder, recognizes it instantly. But a person walking at normal pace, accepting the natural sounds of their own passage, sounds like someone who belongs there, who knows exactly where they are, who's not trying to hide. This is why so many intrusions happen when nobody expects them. The intruder moves carefully and slowly, broadcasting uncertainty. The occupant of the camp hears that unnatural caution and wakes up, alert and ready, while the intruder is still approaching. The roles reverse. The person trying to be quiet becomes the hunted. Number 9 is one you've probably never considered, because we've moved so far from how camps used to be built. It's the camp layout itself, the positioning of your shelter and fire and water sources in relation to the perimeter you've established. Medieval castle architects didn't build walls randomly. They positioned them relative to water, elevated ground, sight lines, and escape routes. Your camp should follow the same logic. Shelter on slightly higher ground than your perimeter. Water source at the lowest point, outside the main camp. Fire in the middle, where it provides both warmth and visibility. This isn't comfort optimization, it's tactical positioning. Higher ground means anything approaching has to come uphill toward you. Lower water means intruders have to leave the perimeter entirely if they're thirsty, which means they cross the known buffer zones. Number 8 is something soldiers still teach in field training because it works across every terrain. It's the listening post. A simple secondary position you establish about 30 to 50 yards from your main camp, ideally downwind, where you station yourself or rotate a watch for 20 to 30 minutes at a time. You're not doing anything there except listening. No talking, no movement, just your ears in the dark. Most intruders move toward light and activity. They follow the path of least resistance. The listening post puts your awareness 30 yards ahead of where they expect it to be. You hear them long before they reach the perimeter you've built. You hear their pace, their equipment, their breathing. Soldiers call it ambient awareness. Hunters call it reading the woods. It costs nothing and requires no technology. Your great-grandfather stood on the porch at midnight for exactly this reason. Number 7 brings us to mirror placement. This one surprises people because it seems almost too simple. Small reflective surfaces positioned at eye level on trees or stakes around your perimeter, angled toward your camp. At night, with a fire or lantern in your camp, these mirrors catch and redirect that light outward. They create a visual barrier of reflection that makes it harder for someone outside your perimeter to see into your camp without being seen themselves. During daylight, mirrors create sight lines. You can position them to see around obstacles or behind trees without exposing yourself. Military observation posts have used this principle for centuries. A small pocket mirror costs less than a coffee and weighs almost nothing. The technology hasn't changed since the 1800s because there's no need to improve on it. Glass reflects light. That's the entire mechanism. Number 6 is the one that still guards military ammunition depots across 3 continents. It's the rope and bell tripwire, scaled to your camp size. A single strand of rope or cord at approximately chest height, running around your perimeter at a consistent distance. Attached at multiple points are bells, or cans filled with pebbles, or anything that produces a distinctive sound when the rope is disturbed. Unlike electronic motion sensors, a tripwire can't distinguish between a deer and a person. That's actually the strength. It doesn't discriminate. Anything moving through that perimeter crosses the rope and triggers the sound. You wake up. You're aware. The intruder knows their approach has been announced. Many of them stop right there. The psychological impact of being detected is often enough to change their calculus entirely. They wanted to move unseen. Now they can't. Number 5 is something you see in old photographs of frontier camps, but almost never in modern wilderness setups. It's the secondary shelter location, prepared but not occupied. A backup shelter, 40 to 60 yards from your main camp, positioned downwind and slightly hidden. It's complete enough to be usable, but not obvious to casual observation. If your primary camp is compromised or threatened, you have a second position you can reach quickly in darkness. This principle comes directly from military defensive doctrine. Forward operating bases always maintain a secondary position. It's not paranoia, it's tactical flexibility. You're not planning for disaster. You're acknowledging that terrain and conditions change. An animal threat from one direction might push you to a different position. A weather change might make your primary shelter exposed. The backup shelter means you maintain agency over your own security. You're never forced to stay in a compromised location. Number 4 is the one that changed siege warfare in the 1700s. It's the abatis, or sharpened stakes and felled trees, positioned with points facing outward around your perimeter. This requires more material and more setup than previous methods, but the effect is substantial. A line of sharpened wood creates a physical and psychological barrier that's impossible to cross quickly or quietly. You can construct a basic abatis in a few hours, with nothing but an axe or saw and rope to position the branches. Unlike barbed wire, it doesn't rust. Unlike fencing, it doesn't deteriorate in a decade. Unlike guards, it never sleeps or loses focus. A charging animal stops because it can't penetrate the barrier. A person stops because crossing it means making noise, taking time, and accepting the risk of injury. It's labor-intensive, but that investment of a few hours buys you weeks of reliable defense. But now we get to the one truth I promised you at the beginning, the revelation that ties everything together. The reason all of these techniques still work when we have thermal imaging and motion sensors and satellite surveillance. Every single defense technique on this list works because it requires the intruder to engage with the actual physical world. Sound reveals presence, light reveals position. Physical barriers require decision-making in real time. Electronic security makes you passive. You're hoping a camera catches something. You're hoping an alert reaches you in time. You're dependent on something else working correctly. Primitive defenses make you active. They force you to stay aware, to listen, to maintain the perimeter, to know your landscape. That's not a limitation. That's the entire point. Your attention becomes the security system. Your knowledge becomes the alarm. Your willingness to stay conscious in your own camp becomes the barrier that keeps threats out. This is what I meant when I said these techniques make expensive gear look useless. Not because they're more advanced. Because they're more honest. They acknowledge that security is ultimately a human problem, not a technology problem. A camera doesn't protect you. Your awareness does. A motion sensor doesn't deter an intruder. The certainty that you'll hear them does. So take this away. Pick one of these techniques this week. Set it up at whatever camp you're planning. Not all of them. 1. Pay attention to how your awareness changes when you maintain an actual perimeter instead of relying on something electronic to do it for you. Notice how differently you sleep. Notice how you position yourself relative to the boundaries you've created. That shift in awareness is the real defense. That's the mechanism that kept people safe for thousands of years before we decided security meant outsourcing your attention to a device. When you go back to doing it yourself, you remember why those devices were never actually necessary in the first place. Thanks for watching. If this perspective on wilderness defense is new to you, please subscribe so you don't miss the next video. Leave a comment below with one defense technique you're planning to set up in your next camp. Hit that notification bell, and I'll see you next time.